And we're live on the Virtual Real Estate Investing Podcast. Frank, I feel like we haven't chatted in a while, and I'm excited about this. How you doing, my man?
I know we've been so busy. We almost missed our podcast this week. I mean, we actually did. We missed. We usually record on Wednesdays. It's Friday, and we're trying to jam it in because we've been so busy. But I'm happy to be here. Good to see you.
Right. I feel like that is definitely the theme. We've been introducing all these podcasts. It's like, hey, we're so busy. But the bottom line is we are, right? Like we were busy in single family. Now we're really trying to make a push towards the self storage. So we're juggling a lot of balls, right? Like trying to be an entrepreneur, trying to live the startup game, trying to figure out our fit. It's a constant hustle and grind, right?
Yeah. Other more tactical thing we've learned is the first 30 days of starting or owning a business, a storage facility, is a lot of work. I mean, it's a shit ton of work. You got new signage, you got to get new gates, you got to communicate to the customers, change the pricing, invest in marketing, train staff. It's like, well, it's like real estate investors, particularly people that buy storage, you're so focused on like deal making, right? Finding deals, setting up all the terms. Then you almost like you can't forget, like you got to run a business now, right? It's a business on top of real estate. So we're learning that, but it's going really, really well. So it's awesome. What are we talking about today?
First, I want to make a quick analogy on taking over a storage facility, right? I think it's real like project management, right? We always talk about flipping, like we flip a lot of houses. We talk about that like project management, but usually when we're flipping remotely, we have one contractor, right? Like sometimes we might have a couple, but it's project management isn't project management if you're managing one person, right? But I think that's what makes it tricky in storage is you're managing an employee, you're managing a tech stack, you're managing the sign company, you're managing customers. It's like there's a bunch of different inputs to the project management piece of a storage facility.
Yeah, I think for storage and probably any sweaty type business, I think you need two playbooks if you're going to scale at a high level. And the first playbook is the first 30 days. You need to have a playbook for the first 30 days that you can repeat. Otherwise, it'll feel like it's just insane. You won't have traction. And then you have your recurring or current operations type playbook. Like what are the things that are going to happen day 30 through day 2000? And that's a separate playbook or project management guide. And you just need two. And I think then you can relax. You're like, okay, I have control, So.
For sure. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the difference between single family and commercial real estate, right? And anyone who's listened to our podcast for a while can feel that evolution, right? Like we wanted to be iBuyers. We wanted to beat Zillow and Opendoor at their own game. And to a certain extent, we said, hey, actually, instead of doing that, we want to go to commercial. So now I think we have some perspective of being able to compare the two. So that's what we're going to jam on today.
For sure. And I'm excited to talk about it. I will add a caveat. We didn't kind of say that. We have said that. If there was a time to buy houses all over the country ahead of the iBuyers, and then maybe you sell those to those iBuyers or whatever, like that time is probably past, right? And even the markets like Killeen, Texas, that we started in, like Opendoor's in there. Like when we make offers now to sellers, Opendoor is making higher offers. So rather than try to beat them, like we're like, hey, we have this awesome opportunity in self-storage to print a little bit of cash. So we have made that decision. I think we should just be clear about that. Like that is a decision we've made. We love single family. We still buy and flip, but we're not trying to make $1 billion there. We're trying to feed our families and make good money.
Excellent. Okay. So we're going to go back to our tried and true lens of looking at things: find, fund, and finish, right? So let's talk first commercial for single family finding deals. I know I lead a lot of that, but you're right on top of it, Frank. So what do you think the biggest difference between commercial and single family for finding deals?
I think a really big difference is the total number of possible leads. Like that's a really big difference. There's just simply a way larger number of single family houses in any given market than a storage facility, right? In the cities we're looking at, generally, there's probably 20 to 30 facilities in a city of about 100,000, 200,000 people. That's kind of what we're seeing. And we're looking at states that have good cash flow potential. So we're not looking at New York Metro. We're not looking at LA. We're looking at Oklahoma. We're looking at Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, stuff like that. So there's probably only a couple thousand facilities in the entire country that would fit in our buy box at all. And then obviously the ones that are on market make up a small subset of that. So there's much less lead volume. So, well, how does that influence behavior? In my opinion, well, you have to treat each one of those leads with a little bit more care and a little bit more nurturing than you would any of your tens of thousands of single family leads that you could pick up the phone and dial a single family lead at any point in time. But as you know, we've spent a month looking at LoopNet, Crexy, whatever, and there would be days where you're like, I didn't find a facility that I'm really interested in. So I think part of it's behavioral. Like, how do you deal with those brokers and those sellers? I think you have to treat those conversations differently because they do matter more from a dollar amount perspective. What do you think?
Absolutely. Right. So I would say, size of market, if you will, right? Like how many available storage facilities are there that we like? That's a big part of it. The other thing I would say is the sophistication of a seller, right? Can be good and bad. So if someone's selling $1 million storage facility, you would think they would be more of a sophisticated seller, but it's kind of all over the map. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not true. Everyone selling $1 million storage facility thinks they're a sophisticated seller, right? And a lot of them are very stubborn. So there's that aspect. But I think maybe the biggest difference from my perspective is how you value the different assets, right? How you value a storage facility versus how you value a single family home. Most single family homes, I can comp or get a after repair value on that house in under a minute, right? That's, some of them, they might take 5 minutes, but generally under a minute, I can get really close and be like, okay, this is about what this house is worth. I can't do that on a storage facility, right? Like we can't. How do you value a storage facility? You have to look at NOI, net operating income, which is how much revenue comes in, how much expenses, what's the money left over? That's NOI. You have to figure out that and then divide it by a cap rate, right? So to do that, I need a lot of information about the storage facility to be able to figure out how much it's worth, right? So this idea of like, hey, I'm going to make 5 offers a day or, something like that. I can't do that, right? Like your offer volume has to be less. And then at the same time, you want to talk to sellers and be like, hey, Mr. Seller, are you interested in selling your facility? Most of them go, what? Yeah, what's your offer? You're like, I can't give you an offer until you give me some more information. So it's a much different outline of a conversation when you're talking with the seller as well.
Yeah. And I would argue, I don't know if this is true or not, but I would argue, or I would guess that the percentage of distressed assets, like seller distress in the self-storage space, might be less than single family housing, right? There's a lot of people that live in housing that's maybe sub 200 grand like that. The overall single family housing market is anywhere between 5 and 10% distressed at any given point in time. If you go down below 200K, it's a little bit higher, right? That's a pretty sizable chunk of the overall housing market that has some seller distress, foreclosure, tax liens, just general issues, right? Evictions, whatever. In self-storage, even if a facility is running like crap, like the owner doesn't know what they're doing and they're not optimizing it, if they've owned that facility 5 years, the market's been so good the last 5 years, like they're not underwater, right? Like they're probably not losing that much money a month, and they have equity in that property, and the market keeps going up. So my guess is, I don't know if this is true or not, but there's less distress. So you got to play ball, right? You're not buying facilities for 60 cents on the dollar. That's the net result. So I think the biggest difference in finding deals for storage and probably a lot of commercial assets is you need a way to do operational or physical value add to the property. You need to figure out a way to pay a higher price. Where in single family, the way most people do, it's like, I get a great closer, like our guy Adam on the phone, and he locks up deals. Like he just sells. And that's where you create your margin. In storage, in our example, you got to create the margin once you buy it, right? You don't only win when you buy, you win when you buy, but you got to actually do the work, which makes the finding process, I think, a little bit different.
Absolutely. I have yet to find a truly motivated seller, right? Someone that's like, yeah, I need to get rid of this storage facility, right? What we often see is someone that they value the facility at $1 million, right? And they're basically like, I know it's worth $1 million, but I don't want to sell it. Someone's going to have to offer me 1.5 million for me to sell it, right? Which in their head is like way over what it's worth because they think it's worth $1 million. So then we have to go, okay, what if we increase occupancy? What if we cut expenses? What if we increase rates? Does that 1.5 million make sense, right? But generally, these owners that are selling think they are getting an amazing deal, and they are, right? The only reason we could pay that much is if we can see opportunities that they can't see. And then the other thing I would say is, part of me hates commercial brokers, right? Part of me hates commercial brokers because they can be egotistical assholes, right? But on average, I'm learning, would I rather talk to a commercial real estate broker or a residential real estate agent? It's not even close. Like, brokers are so much better on average. Okay. There's some amazing agents out there, right? But on average, good brokers I can have great discussions with. They want to get the deal done. So they're working for the seller, but they're also trying to get the deal done. So they're trying to convince you that it's a good deal, as opposed to so many real estate agents out there add so little to the transaction and act like it's an inconvenience when you call them, that I just got to put a plug. My mind's evolving. Brokers still drive me nuts some, but they're a lot better than residential real estate agents on average.
We've talked about this before. Like a broker, if I'm selling a facility over $1 million, we're using a broker. Like that the upside in that transaction for the seller, or downside, I guess, if you don't handle it correctly, is such a large dollar amount. It's going to pay for that broker's commission. Whereas in a single family transaction, like, we've sold multiple houses this year. We sold a house where the agent missed the open house and the tenant in the house just walked people around, and we sold over list price. Like, that agent, the agent's transaction coordinator did literally all the work, and they don't make any money, and the agent got the commission check. Like, they did nothing, So yeah, especially in our environment where selling houses is very, very easy right now. We're definitely in an environment where commercial brokers, I think, still add value with single family agents, TBD for half of them. So I agree 100%. Okay.
Funding.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Funding. So funded deals, right? So fund, finish.
No, I'm going to ask
Funding.
you, what do you like more? We have to say which one's better. What do you like more? What's more enjoyable for you? What do you think is more fun?
Single family is fun, man, because you can get a lot of reps in, right? Like, if you focus 40 hours a week on single family deal finding, I mean, you can make 5 offers a day, so you can get a lot of reps. Like, I guarantee you, Adam, our closer, our acquisitions manager, has done more negotiating than any commercial broker in the country in the last 365 days, right? Like, the amount of negotiations and tough conversations you have in single family is so much greater that you can climb the learning curve so fast, right? So what do I like better for finding deals? Single family is a lot of fun, but I think it's one of those things that after you climb that learning curve, the slightly slower pace of commercial is nice. It's like being on single family is like, being on speed or something. It's just like, let's go, baby. Let's go. And you have to get with deal flow. And commercials, like, okay, let's think about this. What's a price I could pay? Let me make an offer. Let's go back and forth a little bit. We know this is going to take, a week or two to kind of get to a price, but we're both on the same timeline. So it's got to be commercial, but single family is so much fun. And if you haven't gotten started, like, spend time in single family, because you can get so many reps. What about you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth there. I think, to add to what you're saying, single family, you still do some deal making, right? You'll do some creative deals, seller finance. Like, there's some deal making art that you pick up. And I think it's good when you start talking to brokers that you have a little bit of that art in your backpack, so that they feel like, oh, this person is trying to get the deal done, because, like, there's like a deal making skill that you need to have. I think that helps you, because otherwise, if you don't have that, they kind of look at you like, go away, like, go cut your teeth somewhere else, So I think for starting out, I would say single family. I haven't done as many negotiations with brokers as you have, right? But for me personally, I'm a fast talking, fast paced person. Like, I got a lot of energy and I need to expend it, or else, like, I stay up till 11 p.m., or later. So I probably say single family, just to get the constant dopamine hit that I guess I'm seeking,
The other good thing that can be fun with commercial so far is when you are doing single family, if you're talking to a seller, like, seller could be grandma, could be grandpa, could be uncle, brother, like, every demographic you can imagine can be the seller, right? When you're talking to a commercial broker, we have more in common with a commercial broker than any other profession in the country, right? So like
Yeah,
chances are they're mid-30s, they're hustling their asses off. Chances are like, they have very similar hobbies to us. So I think it's much easier to like make jokes and to have a lighter conversation and be able to riff a little bit like that. Where sometimes when you're talking single family, like, someone has nothing in common with you and you have to work really hard to try to develop rapport.
yeah, that's true. That is a good point. All right, now we can move on to fund. So what's different? What's better? What do you like? I'll let you take the lead on this one.
So I think if you want one primary, like one piece of real estate that you're going to live in, then single family is the way to go, right? Because at some point someone said the American dream is owning a home. We've created all this legislature, all these non-governmental organizations to help us with buying primary residence, right? So there's all these, we've both used the VA loan to buy a house with $0 down. People can use an FHA loan where they can put as little as like 3.5% down. There's all these programs to help you buy one single family home. When you go to buy the second single family home, it can be trickier. When you buy, the fifth one, the 10th one, the 20th one, it gets really hard, right? Like it's expensive. There's a lot of transaction costs, and it's difficult to do. What about commercial? Okay. In commercial, they're all hard, right? But if you can play the game and you can say, this is why this commercial real estate can make money, and this is what our loan to value is, and this is what our debt service coverage ratio is, then you're good to go, right? You got to find the bank that wants to buy or lend on that piece of commercial real estate. But once you can speak the language and play the game, the bank's looking at us like, hey, awesome, we got the first one done. Now let's do deals 2 through 20, right? Like they're set up to be able to loan on commercial deals. Yeah.
I would also say, let's go back to brokers for a second, because we're now using a broker to help us, and we're having a good experience with our guy. If you take the average loan or mortgage broker at the commercial side, commercial loan broker, compared to the loan officers you're going to deal with, like for retail, that's also a different person, right? Like this person's having more advanced conversations with us because it's required by their job. This is what I mean. I'm on the phone with them this morning, and we have a 60-day close with like 56 days left, and which is tight, right? When the first time you're working with a new loan officer or bank, right? Because it takes 45 days to do a loan, period, right? So we got like 13 days to get this loan secured. So I call them up. I'm like, hey man, just so you know, this is where we're at. We gave you all the information you need. This is what the deal looks like. If you have any questions, let me know. But I'm like, hey, listen, if there's a lever to pull in this particular deal where we have to be flexible, I was like, let's be flexible on loan to value, LTV, right? Like we can always raise more money from investors, but if you can't find the right person that's going to go 75% loan to value, like we can do 70 or 65, right? But I just need predictability. You got to just tell me. And he knows exactly where I'm at. He goes, you know what? That's exactly what I was thinking too. He goes, I'll let you know, blah, 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 right? Like that took 5 minutes. He knew exactly where I was at. I don't think like loan officers that are doing retail, like on FHA loans or VA loans, are like really able to help guide you that much. So I think there's definitely a difference, and there's more people around to help you. And also, I'll touch on your point on closing costs. We pay similar closing costs on like a $250,000 single family house with a hard money lender and a title company as we did on our $1.4 million storage facility. And some people are like, oh, well, you have the worst lender. I'm like, no, our lender doesn't suck. Straight up, this is what it is, right? Like that, it was better per dollar. So yeah, we got that going for us too.
Yeah, and then I also think when we talk about investors in raising money, right? What's really difficult with single family is investors love investing alongside us in single family, right? They love it. The problem is like it's really hard to manage, right? When in single family, if you're getting investors on a deal to deal basis, right? So each flip you have, you're going to have a different partner or different investor, and maybe a couple of them, and maybe the terms aren't going to be exactly the same. Trying to keep all that straight is really, really challenging, right? Where if you look at $1 million storage facility, you're like, okay, we're going to have, 4 investors. Each investor is going to bring $75,000. This is how it's going to be set up. You start getting economies of scale, not just like financial economies of scale, but communication and project management economies of scale. So I think there's something to be said about the funding aspect of that as well. Is there's a reason real estate private equity works, because there's a proven model about how this goes and the organization and the structure of these deals.
Yeah, and I think that's why like people talk about raising private money for single family, which is the equivalent exercise of raising money for commercial syndication, right? Those are like the same efforts for a different asset class, essentially. And it's raising private money is great, and it's definitely doable. We've done deals with private money on the loan side, but like there's not that many people that want to place $500,000 in a flipping operation, right? And they also don't get any upside, right? So like they're just getting a fixed rate if you're doing it on a loan. I feel like you see a lot of people, because it's hard and it takes a lot of maintenance, like you said, raise private money and then they eventually find a hard money lender that can scale with them, that's a little easier to use and they can rely on them. And they just end up using them anyway, even though they maybe could save a percentage point and a little bit of closing costs by going to a private money lender. It's just so much work if you're doing a high volume operation, unless you're fortunate and you got a private money lender that's got $20 million and they could just bankroll your entire operation, then just, Charlie might continue the mission, but most people don't have that. And then the last point is like this: commercial real estate provides cash flow and upside. The psychology of the investors in the 2021 economy is like, the risk appetite for the average investor in the US right now is high, right? Telling people, hey, you're going to get 9 to 10% fixed rate secured by an asset is a good investment, but people don't even care. And also as inflation gets worse, that investment does get worse too. As inflation goes up, that investment is not as good as it used to be. So I think you just find more people that are willing to gamble a little bit with you and that want the upside, and a deal that can sell for 500 grand more than you bought it for is going to provide that for them. So
I like it. So what's better, funding, commercial or single family?
I will say, I'll say commercial real estate. I think you deal with less BS, better lenders, better closing costs per dollar in the transaction, and economies of scale, like you said.
Yeah, I'll put a caveat that says it depends what your goals are. If your goal is to buy one house a year, I think single family is great, right? Like it's a great place to put money, especially if you're in a place that is likely to see really solid appreciation over the next 10 to 20 years, right? Like if you're in Austin, Texas, I love the idea of buying a house a year for the next 10 years, right? But if you're someone who's trying to be a full-time real estate investor, and do a high volume of deals, commercial lending all the way.
For sure.
Okay, let's talk about finishing deals. That can mean a lot of different things, right? But I'll give it to you first. Finishing commercial deal, finishing a residential or single family deal.
So we haven't really truly finished our storage deal. We've bought it, our first one, and we're now stabilizing that facility. So that's like probably as far as I can go without I guess like speculating. But single family, right? Buy a house, probably flipping that house, putting a rehab into the house, which is painful, right? Doing a rehab in a single family house can be painful. It's where generally most of the risk is. So I think when you're doing a flip and the rehab is like midway through, you probably feel a little level of stress for the next like 2 months until it's done, right? Or until it's listed and the broker or the agent's like, yeah, this I'm confident in this price. You see that price and then you start calculating your profit. And if it's looking good at that point, you're like, okay, now my stress is reduced. You know what I mean? Like until that moment, you have a little bit of anxiety. But on the positive side, you're probably using a GC or one contractor, like a lot of people do. It's not that much work to do the follow-up, right? Like managing a flip, if you can trust your contractor, isn't gonna like take you 40 hours a week, right? It definitely will not. Maybe a couple. Taking a commercial asset and stabilizing it is not going to take a couple hours a week. like I think you feel like you have more control, particularly in storage, because like I'm seeing the fruits of my labor. I'm seeing marketing have occupancy impact. I'm seeing some of the stuff I'm doing with the facility, reduce wages next month. I'm increasing prices. I can see it and I can control it. So operational value add, I guess I should say, is a lot more work, but I feel like I have more control, right? And for me, I like to work and I like to have control. So I'm leaning on the commercial side a little bit. What do you think?
I think if we look at let's call them both deal machines, right? We've got a
Sure.
single family deal machine and we have a commercial deal machine, right? And the three steps are find, fund, finish, right? For single family, we can find deals and negotiate good deals. We have a competitive advantage for finding deals compared to the average buyer, okay? We have an advantage with funding, but we don't really use that advantage because we don't raise money on a deal to deal basis. So in reality, we're paying the same hard money rates everyone in the country is, right? And then what about when we finish? Well, we're doing stuff remotely. So we don't want to do high-end houses. We want to make sure anything can be turned into a rental. We're also generally paying market rates for both our agent and our contractor because we're doing things from far away. So we got to make sure that we can trust those people. So if we look at the deal machine of single family, we really have no competitive advantage after the contract is signed, right? Like we can be good, but people can be just as good as us, if not better than us, right?
Yeah.
So then we look at the commercial deal machine, right? Do we have an advantage on the front end for commercial? I think we can negotiate, but we're dealing with brokers. Maybe we start getting some stuff off market. So maybe we have a competitive advantage, maybe not. Right now, I don't think we do, right? What about funding? Well, I think generally we're trustworthy guys. We're honest. We're transparent. We've got somewhat of a track record in real estate. I think we've got a competitive advantage in fundraising for commercial, right? But then it's a long answer to get here though, right? What about finish? I definitely think we have a competitive advantage in finishing commercial deals. And this is why your average mom and pop owner of a storage facility doesn't know how to use technology. Who cares about technology? Well, you can save a lot of money using technology in a storage facility. How do you know the rates of all your competitors? Well, you can use technology to figure that stuff out, right? How do you make sure everyone's paying on time? You use a credit card processor and you make sure you don't accept cash, right? I think we can absolutely have an operational advantage, an advantage in the finishing aspect in commercial real estate that we didn't have in residential, right? So I'm going to get right to my point is, what do I like better? I like commercial better in the finishing stage because I think we can have a competitive advantage there.
I'm kind of saying the same thing. So I will caveat it with this: the single family space. If you're doing low volume and you have your fingers on the business, like you're someone who does 3 deals a month by yourself, I think the benefit of single family is flexibility on the exit, right? Like buying something with hard money or maybe on seller financing and then selling it again on seller financing. If the deal just fits that mode, is I think easier, right? It's easier to do that in single family. So the art of deal making, just particularly on creative deals like seller financing or subject to, I think you have the advantage on single family and you can finish that way to optimize your returns. But for the operational value add stuff that you just referenced, I agree with that too.
Yeah, right. And you can, I mean, the people that are great at commercial and the people that are great in residential, they have competitive advantages in every step of the process, right? Right. So we looked at it like we never are really going to win in funding and finishing single family from afar. Like there's people that do it, but we won't necessarily be able to do it, right? As we start looking at commercial, right, we believe we can find an advantage in funding and finishing. And I think over time, we think we can get one in fine, right? And I think to create a great business that has a moat around it that can be successful through the long term, you need to have a competitive advantage in each one of those steps.
Yeah, the question for find now we're talking about business planning, like how we're going to improve our business. That we're asking ourselves is, well, you go off market, right? But then it's like, well, how many $5 million facilities off market are people really trying to part with? That's a small number, right? So those are long games, like lots of follow up. You got to exist for a while to bear the fruits of that labor. But we do think, or our hypothesis that we have is $1 million and below is where you'll see more of the distress in self-storage in this asset class. So the question we're pontificating is like, do we go down there? Because right now our buy box, our lower limit's like 1.5, right? Listings. So we're not even looking at those. But if we go off market, maybe we do start looking at those, right? And maybe your exit strategies do change a little bit. Maybe you don't syndicate all those deals. Maybe you only need to bring 50 grand to the table to lock that down, right? So I think that's where we might be able to develop a finding, like direct to seller find competency or moat, as you're calling it. But the rest of it, like the $2 million to $5 million range, I feel like that's going to end up being broker relationships potentially. I feel like that's actually going to be where your competitive advantage is. You've closed 10 to 20 deals. Someone got a deal. They're like, I want someone who can close this. I call them, like that's an advantage. So but that takes time to build that up.
I agree. Let's add a fourth one just because it's our podcast and we can. And I want to make sure we're not sending the wrong message to people. We have find, fun, finish. Let's talk mindset a little bit, right? And the reason I want to talk mindset briefly is because someone might listen to this podcast and be like, I don't want to do single family. They just told me to do commercial, right? So let's talk about the mindset differences a little bit between the two.
Oh man, it's tough. I think, single family feels faster. It feels like you're in a deal machine that moves really, really fast, right? We're making thousands of phone calls a week. Our closer, Adam, is having dozens of conversations with sellers. He's locking up a few contracts a week. And then our sales team, our dispositions team on the back end, asset management, we really should call them because they manage our flips too, has multiple deals moving at all different times. Sellers requesting stuff, buyers requesting stuff, walkthroughs. It's just this very fast machine. So I think the mindset you need to have, I think, is aggressive. I think you got to be very aggressive to be successful in single family. Like you're showing up to work every day and you have good character, you're a good person, but you got to be a little bit of a killer, I think, to thrive in that environment to a certain extent, because you're negotiating and the nature of the business is buyers and sellers get a piece of a pie. And if you're wholesaling, you're getting a piece of that pie. There's no way around it. Negotiating over price on cash deals matters. People try to pretend it doesn't. It matters. Even if you're doing subject to or creative financing, that's what it is. That's where your fees are.
How about the sales gurus that are like, if you're talking about price, something went wrong and you're not doing it right. Like, dude, you need to talk to more sellers.
Shut up. Like, dude, the one of the metrics that people keep is their average fee.
Yeah.
Your average fee. What is your fee based off of? How much equity you created by negotiating? Like, get out of here, right? It obviously matters. At a certain price, you don't lock up the deal, right? And then I'll talk commercials. I guess it's my turn. I think commercial is a much more deliberate. Like you show up to work and it's a much more deliberate mindset. Like you got to really plan out your day. You got to be willing to have days where you're going to be working the whole time, but there's little activity, right? Especially if you're in the acquisition side, like you are. Like you did it 9 hours of work and then the day ends and you're like, I have nothing to show for this. I don't even talk to anybody, right? Like it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. And on the operation side, like that's also, I think, a little bit more of like you're cutting with a scalpel instead of like, like a giant butcher's knife. Right? There's more, an axe. Like there's more precision involved in your behavior, right? Like if you tweak your storage facility, that's going to have an impact on your NOI. Every dollar of NOI is $12 to $14 in eventual value of that property. So all those decisions add up. As they say, ounces turn into pounds, So you have to really, really focus on those ounces to run a good commercial deal. So
I like that. I think all that's spot on. I'll add this is there's people out there specifically, I'm thinking about Grant Cardone, that's like, don't waste your time in single family, go right to multifamily, go right to commercial, right? And I would call bullshit on that. And this is how I would look at it. I would look at like, what are you comfortable with, right? Are you comfortable with doing, a live-in flip? Are you comfortable doing a house hack? Are you comfortable doing a burr? Are you comfortable flipping from afar? Are you comfortable doing a fourplex? Or, are you comfortable doing a $10 million self-storage deal, right? And what I would tell you is like, think about that comfort zone and then go a little outside the comfort zone, right? Like every deal we're doing right now, we're uncomfortable, right? But it's not too far outside our comfort zone. Because I think if someone went from like never doing any single family to like, hey, I'm going to do a $5 million storage facility, they're, there might be a psychopath, or else they're probably going to end up lying, right? They're going to end up faking it till they make it and acting like they know stuff, and they're not going to be asking the right questions. So go outside your comfort zone. But if you try to go from 0 to a $10 million deal, like, I'm not investing with you, and I wouldn't necessarily bet on your success either.
Well, I would ask Grant Cardone, like, how do your followers, someone who believes that, how do they have confidence that they will generate a good return for their investor? I would argue that they can't have that. And thus, if they believe that, they don't care if they generate a return for their investor. So I think, like, if that's the way you think, like, you're probably a selfish GP, and probably won't succeed. Like, it's most people, if you tell them, hey, you have a lot of upside, but you have the chance to lose someone $10,000, and they've never done that activity before, they're going to be terrified. Honestly, you should, right? Like, I care if, as I'm a custodian of people's money now, I care about their returns. Like, that's how they feed their family. So I don't buy that either. I agree with you.
Cool. All right. Good jam. I think both of us are like, hey, commercial's awesome, but we needed our single family experience to get here. I think everyone's going to have their own journey, but keep pushing outside your comfort zone.
I think
all right, Frank,
family's also awesome. They're both
It
awesome.
is.
They're both great.
We know a lot of people crushing single family, making a great life for themselves, right? But
sure.
You got the final word. Take us out, homie.
No, thanks. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, having a lot of fun. Again, follow us on Twitter. I got my man John Plumstead, or at John Plumstead, JOHN, and I'm at Frank Scat with 2 P's. Later.